I know there weren't enough to go around, but please feel free to look on with somebody who does have a copy. What I prepared is a single page, which I've called a bottom line comparison of the proposal by Ron Jaworski Golf versus a not-for-profit. And I just deal with two broad brush aspects of it, economics and intangibles. I've set up columns for the Ron Jaworski Golf proposal, broken down years 1 through 5, years 6 through 10, and years 11 through 15, and comparable information for the not-for-profit. Ron Jaworski Golf in years 1 through 5 guarantees, actually let me back up a second. My focus, and I think the only focus that matters, is on the bottom line to Brigantine. What is going to generate the best financial position for Brigantine without incurring risk, which I think is a key factor, and I'll talk about in a second in the intangibles. But just in terms of the dollars, and remember the Jaworski dollars are guaranteed dollars. These aren't speculative dollars depending on how the course performs or anything else. This is what's in his proposal financially. In years 1 through 5, payments will total, this is guaranteed lease payments, will total $250,000. He is guaranteeing at least $300,000 in capital investment. That's $550,000. I've backed out of that $151,000 attributable to county taxes over that period. Now, we've heard tonight that there's a very good chance that our course is substantially overassessed, and I would strongly recommend that if the assessor, in fact, has not made that correction that Fred Cerny talked about earlier, based on the discussions between Mr. Cerny and our representative from the reval company and our assessor, that the city should appeal those taxes to get that total value down where it ought to be. But I'm going with a high number of 151. So in years 1 through 5, that nets out to $399,000 in value. In years 6 through 10, guaranteed payments of $500,000. Guaranteed capital investment minimum of $200,000. Again, backing out the county taxes, netting you $549,000. Years 11 through 15 in the Jaworski proposal would be the same financially as years 6 through 10. In the not-for-profit, years 1 through 5, there are no guaranteed lease or comparable payments. That number is a 0. There is no, again, referring to the proposal which is attached, there is no guaranteed capital investment. That number is a 0. There is a payment of $1,155,125 to debt service. But I'm backing out from that the new borrowing because, as Councilman Picardi has pointed out, and I think quite aptly, we're borrowing money under this proposal to pay off borrowed money. That's no net gain to the city because, remember, in this structure, the city is responsible, ultimately responsible. If operations from the course under a not-for-profit don't cover operating expenses, aren't sufficient to pay for capital improvements, aren't sufficient to pay for your borrowing, that the not-for-profit's borrowing, that is absolutely 100% on the taxpayers. They will be responsible for it. So I'm backing that number out so that your year 1 through 5 net under the not-for-profit is $455,000. In years 6 through 10 under the not-for-profit, again, there are no guaranteed payments to the city. There's no guaranteed capital investment. Same in years 11 through 15. And I keep saying the word guaranteed because it's an important word. What matters is what is guaranteed. We may be optimistic, we may speculate that things will go well, we may be confident that we, whoever is running a not-for-profit, will be able to cut costs, would be able to generate more revenues. None of that is promised to you. That absolutely is not a promise. Nobody's making that a promise, and nobody's making it a guarantee. The intangibles. Number one intangible, I've been talking about this for 2 years, is risk. Under the Jaworski proposal from day one, all risk of losses, deficits, and capital costs is solely borne by Ron Jaworski Golf. Now, whether that's for a 5-year term, a 10-year term, or a 15-year term, that holds true throughout the term. They, and not the city, are responsible for all the risks. Under the not-for-profit, from day one, any cost which can't be paid from the course revenues will be borne by the city. It's as simple as that. There's only 2 players in that equation. It's the not-for-profit and it's the city. If the course is not generating enough money to pay its obligations, the city is on the hook, and the city means the taxpayers. In terms of organization, Ron Jaworski Golf, they're established professionals. They own, as we heard from Mr. Galvin, I thought he made a very nice presentation and articulated the benefits that Ron Jaworski brings and can bring to the city. They have a regional presence, they have marketing expertise, and they have capital resources. The NFP has no other courses and will have no capital resources other than what the city provides it or what it's able to generate through ongoing operations. We don't know anything concrete at this point about the proposed structure or the membership. Now, in preparing that summary, I took at face value, because until tonight I had no information about the proposed cost savings that would be realized annually under the not-for-profit. First time tonight I'm hearing about these. I have questions about a number of them, and there's a few of them which I think you got to take off the table. Water paid to the city, $40,000, which under the not-for-profit would not be paid to the city. That's $40,000 of cost to the city. You can't back that out simply to make your bottom line look better. You're taking that money from the city. That's no different than extra borrowing. It's not a real savings, certainly to the city. The not-for-profit is just a shell. It's an entity. The city is the financially responsible party. If you're saying to the city, we're not going to pay you that $40,000, that is absolutely coming right out of the taxpayer's pocket. I don't think that's a valid reduction in your projected costs. Professional fees, we talked about up here. You know, I don't see it. I just don't see where you're going to get that. We have no data, no information about the proposed $40,000 savings in payroll. I can't take that at face value. Electric, the $17,000, proposed that it would be paid by the food and beverage operator. I'm not sure where that assumption comes from and why we are expected to assume that we can save $17,000 on electric because there will be a food and beverage operator willing to pay that. And even if they are, then where we also talked about, or I should say Councilman Simpson, talked about the fact that no food and beverage was included in his projections. I don't see a food and beverage operator, especially given what Mr. Galvin said about the fact that it's more of an amenity than anything else at this particular course, paying the $17,000 for electric and something over and above that for the privilege of being there. So I think these are very, very questionable assumptions in terms of your ability to reduce costs in year one and then to continue that going forward, because things do cost more over time. That, I don't think you need to be a business expert to realize that. And as far as the revenues, I think it is a different situation when, you know, if I was a business person doing a pro forma and going to the bank, I might very well project that I'm going to have increasing revenues over time. Except that this is an asset, there's two major differences. The first and biggest is that if I, as a businessman, am going to a lender with a pro forma seeking some kind of financing, that's my money at risk. That's my skin in the game. It's not the case with a not-for-profit. With a not-for-profit, you know, feel free to indulge any crazy assumptions you want, because in the end, if it doesn't work, if it doesn't play out, if you've grossly overstated income or understated projected costs, it's on the taxpayers. It's not 1 cent coming out of anybody else's pocket. So that's one major difference. And the other major difference is that when you look at this particular course and this particular industry in our region, and Mr. Galvin also touched on this, and I thought he covered it very well, and it's not something new. We've been talking about this for 2 years. We have all seen the numbers. Revenues have been on the decline. It's not that they've been stable. It's not that they've been creeping upward. They have been on the decline. Throw out the year 2013 because that was an anomaly post-Sandy. But 2014 revenues substantially below those of 2012. The last full, that wasn't even a full year. That was a year where you lost 2 months. And even then, 2014 revenues were below that. You can't assume, I won't assume, because I've been put up here with a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. I am not going to put on a happy face and assume that our revenues are going to climb and that our costs are going to stay, we're going to be able to reduce them and keep them down. To me, those are reckless assumptions. It all comes back to risk. Ron Jaworski's, and there's not a universe of different things we're looking at here. There are two proposals. There's a proposal from Ron Jaworski, and there's us running it. Whether it's a not-for-profit or anything else, they're your two choices. In the one, you have somebody who's going to step in, and over the life of this, if he goes for the 15 years, is going to generate positive cash for the city. You have no guarantees at all. On the other side, maybe it works out, but if it doesn't, that's on you. That to me is, I'm not going to play games with taxpayers' money like that. That's an irresponsible risk that I don't think is worth taking at all.
Okay, Rick, you're sitting here and telling me there's guarantees from 6 to 10. Well, you know Mr. Jaworski, only Mr. Jaworski can extend his lease. So there's no guarantees from 6 to 10, years 6 to 10. So we have to look at the first 5 years. Rick. Speaking of no skin in the game, Mr. Jaworski has no skin in the game. We're the one financing him. So he has no skin in the game. The water bill, Ed, does the Rams pay their water bill when we water the football field? Does the softball fields when they water that? You know, any other amenities that the city of Brigantine owns, do we charge them for the water bill?
No, none of our recreation complexes.
Thank you. So you can't go from, you know, guarantee, these are guaranteed numbers, then over on the other side there's no guaranteed numbers. So Mr. Jaworski, under his one-page proposal, doesn't say any of that. And we asked him to clarify it. He doesn't say what's the $300,000. He doesn't say what he's going to put it into. It's a one-page, one-line item. That's all there is. When we try to get a hold of him, you know, I wish I had more information. But we got to move on, people. We're losing $7,500 a month on a fee that we shouldn't be doing right now. So we have to make a decision. I agree with Rick on one thing. We've been talking about it for 2 years, and if this was such a great idea, I don't know why the previous administration didn't vote on it and pass it at that particular time. So they had the votes. They had 5-2. So go ahead.
I'm just curious, and Rick, and I appreciate you putting this, you know, on paper and taking the time to analyze it. The one area that I'm not seeing is the cost to the taxpayers years 1 through 5 and under the two proposals. And the way that I look at it, taking all into account, the cost per taxpayers would be anywhere from $750,000 to $800,000 under the Jaworski proposal, and it would be zero according to the projections that we've been given by the nonprofit. Now, it's important, too, over the next couple of years, because we'll be fully funding the debt service in our budget as well. So we will be responsible for inserting that $400,000 or approximately $400,000 in those budgets for the next 2 years with no offset in revenue. But, you know, once again, I appreciate your due diligence in putting this together, but, you know, the bottom line is, what is the cost to the taxpayers over the next couple of years, and then beyond that, of course, is important as well.
Oh, Phil, hold on. Let's not just dismiss that last part. Beyond that's important as well. You, the not-for-profit proponents, present a snapshot of 5 years, because within that 5 years, you can come up with a scheme through borrowing and through assumptions, which I think are
well,
very
first of all,
questionable.
no. When you say scheme there, Rick, you're being a little dishonest there, Rick.
No,
I mean,
right, Andy, it's not dishonest.
There's no guarantee Mr. Jaworski is going to, after 5 years, lease the course again. There's no guarantee on that. So you have to use a snapshot of the first 5 years. And I didn't fluff the numbers. I didn't do any of that kind of thing. I made them very conservative numbers, as the taxpayers will lose $1,056,000. If after 2 years the nonprofit doesn't work, it's not going to hurt my feeling. We'll put it out for RFP again and see what happens. Because you know what? But, you know, you guys are sitting here saying that the nonprofit's not going to make it. It's going to be a burden on the taxpayers. Well, if that's the case, Mr. Jaworski's not going to make it either. So then the taxpayers lost $1,055,000, and then they're going to get the course back in disrepair, and then we're going to have to put more money into it. So right. I think the snapshot of the first 5 years is the most relevant piece of this contract we should be looking at.
Right, and Andy, if you want to do that, if you want to do the snapshot of just the first 5 years, you can't ignore the $700,000 that's being borrowed. That's not revenue generated as not-for-profit. That's not founder invested money. That's money
$700,000, or that's if we closed up shop, the city would have to pay the $700,000. You're guaranteed $1,055,000. That's why you have a profit here of $455,000, because that's the loss between what the city's, what the nonprofit is going to pay to the city, and what the guaranteed loss of Jaworski deal is.
Right.
You know,
Hey, Rick?
if the not-for-profit doesn't work, nobody is going to come in and bid on this for any reason. But if the Jaworski doesn't work, a not-for-profit can still come in. But the reverse will not hold true.
And if you want to look at, again, just the first 5 years,
So we lost $1,055,000.
Yeah, if you back out the
then we'll do
$700,000.
the nonprofit.
Andy, if you back out the 700,000, you've got 455,000 generated to the plus by not-for-profit. If you put the $40,000 of water costs that you want to ignore back into the equation, then the Jaworski proposal is better by about 100,000 over the first 5 years.
No, it's not. No
yeah,
way.
it is.
Because he's paying for water. A question,
But what is he paying? What is he paying on capital improvements? We're still in the same situation. We don't know what that $300,000
at least
means.
300,000,
Here's,
at least.
Well,
here's
you-
what we do know,
you know,
Andy.
you-
The not-for-profit has
Everybody,
zero capital
when we
improvement.
started this, we were slapping our hands on the table, or not me, but the other people, were slapping our hands on the table. We're going to force people to put $2.5 million in our golf course. Now we're down to $300,000 and a losing lease. And
Because of the
we just
market.
keep going backwards. Every time we asked Mr. Jaworski, we went from $500,000 in 4 years. Then he comes back with, here's my best and final one. He went from 500 in 4 years to 300 in 5 years. So we lost 200 grand there, plus another year.
Well, the golf industry itself is
We're,
in
we're,
decline.
we're
He's not
losing
gonna
just
expand.
talking to the guy.
Yeah.
The other thing that we know is that, and I keep going back to this, that there is no food and beverage revenue in this operation. And I don't know what the numbers look like, but I can tell you anecdotally, golf course does okay with the number of events and banquets it has, but it is not an aggressive operation to try and bring those types of events to the golf course. Perhaps another vendor in there, someone else operating that would do much better in the food and beverage area. And the other thing I want to mention too is, and I'm not a golfer, but I do live on the golf course, and I can tell you that the residents who surround the golf course they know that it is a city-owned course. It is not just a golf course. It is used, although not sanctioned for that use, but to police it would be a rather heavy burden, and it is used for other uses, and I can tell you that by looking out my back door. I don't know whether that continues under a private operator going forward, with people walking their dogs and sledding and
So the rest of the city
football
has
games.
to, the rest of the city is subsidizing so people around the golf course can walk their dogs on the golf course
Well,
and go sleigh riding.
Joe, I don't know how you
We're
draw
subsidizing the dog park.
Joe, I don't know how you draw a conclusion like that, but I will tell you this, since you opened the door. The golf course had about 24,000 rounds. What I'm
How
being
many
told
were
is
paid
about
for?
27 to 30% of those rounds are played by people who are residents or property owners. So when you do the math on that, you have, let's say, roughly between 7,000 and 8,000 times residents or taxpayers are using a recreational asset. I'd like to ask you if there are any other recreational asset the city of Brigantine owns that has that amount of use by its residents. It's not the tennis courts. It's certainly not the football field and the baseball fields and the soccer fields. We don't have,
How about
when
the
you
beach?
look at those numbers, you have thousands of residents, thousands of times a resident has gone out and used that facility, or a taxpayer going forward. So yeah, it is important that all residents of Brigantine, because probably not all of them live on the golf course, but that all residents of Brigantine do have access to it, and it remains an affordable course for people to use. The other point that I was going to make, and you may not agree on this, we do have a golf course master plan, but I can tell you right now that you could open up the golf course next year, turn the key on the golf course, you might have to do some maintenance on the sprinkler system and perhaps do some other general maintenance, but I don't see where you need to put millions of dollars into the golf course over the next year or possibly even over the next 5 years. So I go back to the maximum exposure that Mr. Jaworski has is $300,000. That's not a minimum, that's a maximum for him. And there are a number of ways that capital improvements can be done. There are a number of ways that general improvements and maintenance can be done over time. In fact, I think our present operators have done a good job with some of those things working through our groundskeeper and the things that are done on a daily basis. But when I look at this proposal, I see one thing. Under one proposal, the taxpayers are guaranteed to spend anywhere between $800,000 and $1 million to pay the debt service. Under the other proposal, could be zero if it works. And there's no guarantee it's going to work, and I understand that. But when you look at the difference between the two, I think it's important to give it a chance as an entity, and also I believe that having residents and taxpayers have input into how the course is operated and where it goes in the future is vitally important as well.
And don't forget, it's probably the only asset the Brigantine has where OPM, other people's money, has paid for it. Now, I understand the taxpayers have paid so far about $1 million on a $4 million asset, but right now the golfers pay for the course. Nobody paid for the football field but the taxpayers. Nobody paid for the baseball field but the taxpayers.
$675,000 we paid this year? That didn't come from the golfers.
Joe, if you listen to what I say to you, I said they paid about $1 million so far on a $4 million asset. That's including the payment this year.
No, it's not a $4 million. It's probably a 1.3.
You bought it for $4 million, Joe.
But it's not worth that now.
Well, neither's my house. I mean, it's still an asset. It's like the pool. My pool got wiped out by Sandy. I didn't want the pool in the first place, but it was my asset, so I had to fix it. I had to put $20,000 into my pool. I didn't want to do it, but I had to. If somebody else was willing to give me $20,000 to fix my pool, I would take it. So it's our asset, Joe. That's what it cost us in 2002.
It's also our liability.